So the next reading we're moving into this semester is the first of a series of 3 lectures that Christine Korsgaard gave in 1992 under the general title, The Sources of Normativity. And one of the reasons that I really like starting with Christine Korsgaard at the beginning of the semester is because I think too often philosophy gets this reputation of being just a bunch of books written by dead guys. And the nice thing is that Korsgaard is neither of those. She is alive and well and teaching at Harvard, probably even as you're watching this video. And so I like starting with something kind of contemporaneous. Now I know to you 1992 seems like an awfully long time ago, but just this idea that there are still people asking new questions in ethics, there are still conversations happening, that these are still active, live issues. So if you've looked ahead on the syllabus, you've seen that at the end of the semester, we will eventually come back around to lecture 3. Here at the beginning of the semester, we're starting with lecture 1. We're just skipping over lecture 2, not because it's good, but just because it doesn't really do what we're looking to do in the course. But the nice thing there is if by the end of this course you realize that you just love Christine Korsgaard's writings and you want some more, all 3 lectures are freely available online. The Tanner Lectures in Human Values are published online in PDF form every year. And meanwhile, these 3 lectures were eventually expanded out into a book, also entitled The Sources of Normativity. And when Christine Korsgaard published that book, she published it along with responses from a couple of her colleagues. You get to see people sort of arguing back with Christine Korsgaard and how she responds to them. And then, of course, since then, she's also gone on to write a series of important and interesting books. But here at the beginning of the semester, we're just going to take a look at this very first lecture from the Sources of Normativity, that lecture entitled The Normative Question. As I said with Eric Fromm in the previous reading, at the beginning of the semester here, I'm not exactly interested in the theories and answers being offered to us by these authors. I'm really more focused on the questions that they're asking. They are giving us a series of critical questions that we can ask as we look at our major test cases for the semester. So Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Immanuel Kant's Grounding of the Metaphysics of Morals. I'll want to be able to take these questions with us to help us think through and think more carefully and think more critically about some of these authors. And so, yes, at the end of the semester, I'll want to turn and see how Korsgaard herself answers this normative question. But right now, at the beginning of our semester, I just want to focus on getting that question straight. Thinking about how she asks that question, what that question means, and furthermore, sort of these 4 types of answers that she offers us. So I want to begin by looking very carefully at the normative question itself. And in particular, I want to spend a little bit more time than Korsgaard herself does distinguishing that question from what I might call the normal question of ethics. And at the beginning of our semester already, we started asking that question, the question of ethics. And at its heart, that question really is, what's the difference between right and wrong, right? And as we've already said this semester, asking that question, then we start to then already ask a couple of other interesting questions, right? Why do you draw the line there? How do you draw the line? How do you distinguish? And furthermore, what do you mean when you call something the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? And already right there, as we've said, to call something the right thing to do is not just to describe it, right? It's not like calling something blue or calling it 12 inches long or calling it 37 degrees Fahrenheit. To call something the right thing to do isn't just to describe it, it's to recommend it, right? To tell me that something is the right thing to do, you're telling me that I ought to do it. And likewise, to tell me that something is the wrong thing to do is to tell me that I shouldn't do it. As Korsgaard puts that on page 2, ethics makes claims on us, right? It makes claims on our behavior. You should not do this. You ought to do that. You must do this. And so the normative question now comes in on a separate level for Korsgaard. Because when ethics is making claims on us, Korsgaard says the normative question asks, what justifies the claims that morality makes on us? Now, what does it mean to justify a claim? I mean, when you ask someone to justify something they've said or to justify their action, you're asking them to sort of explain to you why it's right, explain to you sort of where they're coming from, explain to you the authority involved. And there's a similar question happening here. I want you to imagine you tell me that I ought to do something. Right? You ought to help that person in need. You ought to tell this person the truth. You ought to give that money you found. Now, when I ask you, but why? Why should I do that? You might say to me, well, because it's the right thing to do. And notice, and I think for you and me, so often, that is already a reason to do it, right? Well, because it's the right thing to do. But as Korsgaard says, even those of us who think that that is a reason to do something, we still don't have necessarily an explanation for our intuition there that might necessarily survive sort of stating out loud, right? I mean, imagine I ask you, well, why should I do the right thing? And you say, well, because these people aren't going to like you if you don't do the right thing. And well, that's not a very good reason not to do a bad thing, right? Really what you're telling me is don't get caught doing the wrong thing, because then these people aren't going to like you. You're not telling me I ought to be good. You're just telling me I ought to not publicly be bad, right? So what we need here is something that will justify the claim. So what does that mean? I ask, well, why should I do this? And you say to me, well, because it's the right thing to do. And now I say to you, but why should I do the right thing? And you say, well, because that's what it means to be a good person. And again, I ask you, well, but why should I be a good person? As Korsgaard puts the question even more directly at the beginning of that paragraph on page 2, why should I be moral? And that's the normative question, right? It's not asking what the difference between right and wrong is. It's not asking what are the good things and what are the bad things. It's asking, regardless of what's right and what's wrong, why should I care about that distinction at all, right? Why should I care about being a good person? Why do I have to be a good person? Why shouldn't I be a bad person? And so there are two totally different kinds of debates or arguments that you and I could have, right? I could say, well, I'm going to tell this person a lie. And you might say, well, no, lying is wrong. You shouldn't do that. And you and I might argue about whether or not telling lies is always bad, right? But there, we're both accepting you shouldn't do bad things. We're just trying to figure out, is this particular thing bad? That's not a question about the normative question. There, we're just debating ethics, right? But the normative question is now a separate level. If you and I both agree that lying to someone is bad, we both agree that this is right and that's wrong, still I might ask, but why shouldn't I do a bad thing, right? Why should I be moral? Why should I care about that distinction? There, we're not debating what's right and wrong. I'm asking for justification for engaging in morality in the first place. That is the normative question. As Korsgaard herself says, the day comes when morality is hard, right? I mean, most of the time, hopefully you find that The right thing to do is what you want to do anyway, right? The wrong thing to do, by and large, not the thing you even want to do. That you find it, hopefully, much of the time easy to be a good person. But the day comes sooner or later where doing the right thing is hard, right? Where I really, really don't want to do the right thing, or I really, really want to do the wrong thing. And that's where this question of normativity is so important, right? If I want to do the right thing anyway, I do it, and fantastic. But if I really don't want to do the right thing, then I start asking, do I have to do this? Why do I have to do this? That is the normative question, right? Why am I obligated to do this right thing when I really, really don't want to do it? Or why do I have an obligation not to do the wrong thing when my heart's desire is tied up in it? So this is why this question is so important, right? We've got to pay attention to not just what the difference between right and wrong is, but why we have to care about this difference. Because if I don't have to care about this difference, if this is just something I'm putting myself through for no reason, I want to know that so that I can just stop torturing myself, right? But if there's a reason why I ought to care about that difference, that's what we need to pay attention to. Now, when I ask you, well, why should I be moral? Here, notice, and this is really important, I'm not necessarily asking you to show me that it's in my best interest. Now, that is a possible way of telling me that I should be moral, right? To show me that it's good for me. But as Korsgaard points out, that's simply one way of answering the question. That's not what the question itself means. And so to try to show you more carefully what the question itself means, Korsgaard is going to sort of situate that question, that why should I be moral, within a larger normative question that she will put in terms of the sources of normativity. Now, normativity, you'll notice, is a noun, right? Normative, there's an adjective, but normativity, that's a noun. So what's the difference? Well, normative, as we've said, is a kind of a claim, right? Normative versus descriptive. Normativity is a thing, and that thing, if you need a better synonym for it, let's just call that thing obligation. And so when Korsgaard asks in these lectures about the sources of normativity, she's really asking the question, where do obligations come from? And so here there's going to be a wider version of the normative question. That wider version of the normative question isn't just why am I obligated to be moral? The wider version of the normative question is why am I obligated to do anything at all? Where do obligations come from? What makes obligations obligatory? And by laying in a larger context, Korsgaard figures, okay, that's going to help us sort of pay attention specifically to where moral obligations come from. And so I do want you to pay attention to how these two kind of levels of the normative question, or the sort of narrow scope versus the wider scope, fit together. Because as Korsgaard turns to the ways of answering the normative question, it's always going to be a matter of, okay, moral obligations are obligations because they come from this place where obligations more generally come from. So Korsgaard is going to try to show you over the course of this lecture that there are four possible ways, at least four ways that she sees that we've tried so far, of explaining where obligations come from and what makes moral obligations obligatory. And so I want to stress these are four different ways of answering the question. They are certainly not four pieces of an answer, because these four categories really disagree with one another. To say that this is the answer is to say that that's not the answer. But likewise, even within one of these categories, there's room for some disagreement. And so you'll notice Korsgaard spends a lot of time talking about both Pufendorf and Hobbes, who are both, in her telling, versions of voluntarists. And so even though they're both voluntarists, that doesn't mean they agree about everything, right? They still have some room for disagreement, but their way of answering the question about where obligation comes from is are both kinds of voluntarist. And so what Korsgaard is going to show us over the course of this lecture are 4 different categories of answer. And that's important for me because, again, I'm not concerned at this point in our course with Korsgaard's answer to the normative question. What I am concerned with is having this question with us in a way that we can start to ask it of the people we read next. And so as we get to Aristotle, as we get to Kant, we'll be able to ask, okay, how are they answering Christine Korsgaard's question? Are they answering it? Is this just something that they fail to give us enough information to answer? Or have they shown us why they think we ought to be good people? And once they do show us that, if we can find an answer to that question, then we can ask which of these 4 boxes that Korsgaard has given us do these authors fall into? And so when we read Aristotle, we'll be able to ask not just how does he answer the normative question, but also, okay, which box does that mean we can put him in? What type of answer would Korsgaard call that? Is Aristotle a voluntarist? Is Aristotle a realist? So this gives us a way of thinking critically about these authors. So I want us to have this question, but I also want us to have some categories of answers so that we can start to think more carefully about how people answer that question. Now, Korsgaard is going to look at the history of Western philosophy, at least going back to the early modern era, the early 1600s. Now, of course, we'll go back even farther than that, right? We're going to take this question into Aristotle with us. But on Korsgaard's telling, if you look at least the last, say, 400 years or so, you can find 4 distinctly different categories of answer, 4 different ways that people have tried to answer this normative question. And so what we're going to do over the course of the rest of this module is to sort of work through these 4 categories carefully, get them clear, figure out what she means by voluntarism, realism, reflective endorsement, and the appeal to autonomy. But here's the thing, I want to just for the moment point out that it's entirely possible that there are other ways of answering the normative question. Ways that nobody's tried yet, ways that Korsgaard has overlooked. And if, as we're going through an author, or if, as you're just thinking about your life, you say, oh, hang on a second, I think I've got an answer here that Korsgaard hasn't addressed, then I want to pay attention to that. But at least from her reading of the last 400 years or so, and Korsgaard teaches at Harvard, so she knows what she's talking about. She seems to have done a pretty good job of working through and just finding the 4 ways that people have tried so far. And so that's what we're going to be sort of sorting through here. These are 4 different ways of answering that question. So coming out of this module then, I'll want you to have a series of critical, interesting philosophical questions we can ask about ethics and about theories of ethics. My goal for the end of this course is for you to have thought through some of these issues for yourself, not to be fully committed to Aristotle or Kant or any other person's answer, but rather to have your own series of answers you've thought through. And that process, I think, really begins with just starting to ask new questions, starting to ask more careful questions, starting to ask interesting questions, things that we might not necessarily have thought about.